Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, for of such is the kingdom of God."
We are the Chapman family, missionaries to kids, partnering with churches to reach their communities for Christ.
In this podcast, we want to share with you biblical principles for reaching and discipling kids.
Whether you are a parent, a pastor, or a children's ministry volunteer, our goal is to inspire and equip you with philosophical and practical tools to show children the fullness of the gospel.
Come join us on this epic adventure.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Mr. Forrest Ministries podcast, pointing kids to Christ in the home and in the church. You'll notice a few things are different today. We are not in my office, so there's not 100 action figures behind me, but we didn't want you to miss out, so I brought a few here just so it feels a little bit more like home. We changed seasons. We're not home and road this season. We're actually on the road this season at Bible camps. And here we are at Camp Manderley in Tennessee. And today we have a special guest on the podcast. This is Amber Pike. And so what we're going to do here is we are just going to get to know Amber a little bit and then ask her some questions about kids ministry because of her extensive background in it. So welcome, Amber.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the podcast. And can you catch us up, like our audience, so they can get to know you? Just give us like a brief overview of your life in kids ministry. How long you've been in kids ministry, what it means to you. Give us a quick snapshot of all that.
Absolutely. So I started at 15, little small country church, and we were using old lessons from a previous person. We didn't have all the components, so it wasn't working. So 15-year-old me marched up to my pastors and like, "Hey, can I be in charge?" And they said yes, because we let 15-year-olds write the lessons.
Okay.
So I was writing the lessons, managing volunteers, all this stuff that I had no clue how to do, but I loved kids. The next summer, VBS, God calls me into children's ministry. That very clear. I have a picture from that day, which is really special. We were teaching the kids, go fish for Jesus, and they had no clue what it meant because they were 3 and didn't understand abstract thinking. And I felt God say, "Amber, I want you to do this for the rest of your life." And then about 20 years later, I've still been doing it. So I've served as a children's minister for the last 17 years between children and director of family ministries at 2 different churches. In the meantime, I've published several books through Tyndale. I worked with a former company where I worked with children's ministers and spoke at conferences and led conferences, and I was the dean of an online academy for children's ministry. I was a magazine editor for children's ministers. So I eat, sleep, breathe children's ministry. I currently serve as the church and family ministry coordinator at Renew a Nation, where our mission is to equip millions of boys and girls with a biblical worldview. And I serve in our church and family division. So I get to work with more children's ministers, even though I'm not actively serving. God called me out last summer, which was honestly really hard to no longer be in the church every single week. But now I get to teach those that are teaching week in and week out and equipping moms and dads, and then church leaders to equip moms and dads. So I'm still in the thick of it.
And home is in Kentucky for you?
Home is in Kentucky, yes.
Okay. Very cool.
So I know what that feels like. So there is nothing quite like being the kids pastor and serving the same families every single week. And then when you move away from that, it's like you're missing a piece of yourself. And man, I tell you that, we know, and you know what God wants you to do now, but that doesn't take the emotions out of it where it's like, ugh. And then if you see those same kids on a regular basis, you're like, it's tough, right?
And it was harder for me because it was very bad. The church situation was going on 2 years of toxic. The pastor was lying to the church. My position was taken away from me, even though I was doing all the things that should be done. But I rubbed them the wrong way after 10 years. And so I fought God. I ignored him for a while until he said go. I realized a friend asked me, "Are you hurting your family by staying here?" And that day I'm like, oh, I am. Yeah. I'm hurting my family by remaining. So then I had to leave.
And sometimes even yourself, and you don't realize it because those scars build up. The scars build up, and then it's a real danger of becoming bitter or just even becoming jaded and stuff. And along those lines, since we're kind of we have some questions set up, but for the most part, it's just a conversation. Yeah. Along those lines, I think, unfortunately, a lot of churches don't put the premium emphasis on kids ministry that they should. So when somebody is gifted and passionate about kids ministry, they're just like, whoa, settle down there. Let's just give the kids some animal crackers and some coloring sheets and get them out of the way so we can do adult stuff. When pioneers in kids ministry want to be like, no, we're at the front of the ship and we're charging forward, and it's unfortunate. So if there's any pastors watching, can I encourage you, just hand the reins to your kids ministry person and let them dream and let them go where God takes them, and get behind them and support them, because like we talked about our last chunk of podcasts where it was called Kids Are the Church. Because people are like, well, kids are the future of the church. Okay, but they're the church right now too. So they belong, and they need to feel like they belong. And really, in our culture, not saying in every culture, but in our culture, the best way to reach people is to reach them before they're 18. Yeah. That's the best way to reach people in our culture. And so we have to put the emphasis on this, not make it just this little thing, push them in the corner, whatever. And so that's unfortunate. And then maybe it was like this in your situation, maybe not, but some people are intimidated when somebody is gifted, passionate, and kind of an expert in their field. They feel like, well, I got to be the smartest person in the room, and this person's gifted and passionate and excellent in their field. And something I appreciate about Dave here at Mandalay is when you're not around, he speaks so highly of you. Mm-hmm. He says, she's awesome.
Everybody wants her.
And he says, like, she knows what she's doing. So he recognizes your gifts, and he lets you, he recognizes also that you're an expert in that field, so you kind of know what you're doing, which is great. But on the other end, I don't know if this is what you experienced, but I think a lot of people are kind of intimidated by it. Like, oh, wow, this person's better at her job than I am at my job. Can't have that.
Unfortunately, because I'm female, it's even worse. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I'm from the Baptist denomination, and there are a lot of, and I hear it echoed all the time, that in the Baptist churches, well, you are just babysitting. Mm-hmm. And, I'm a published author. Like Tyndale published my book. I've had countless magazines. I've contract written for the majority of the publishers out there. I know what I'm doing.
And you've worked with curriculum.
Yeah.
Right. Answers in Genesis.
David C. Cook. Like I've worked with some of the big guys. Yeah. And my former pastor did not care what I had to say whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And so much of it was because I was female, and because generationally, I'm usually about a decade to two younger or more. Mm-hmm. And I know it sounds like such a cop-out, like it's because I'm female. Unfortunately, we're still a little like that in the church world. Not everybody, and I'm so glad for those of you who your pastor is awesome and recognizes your gifts, whether you're boy, girl, or just crazy. I love it, but yeah, and it stinks, and there are so many children's ministers fighting that battle.
And even kids. So like one of the things we talked about on a previous episode was that there are no discriminatory barriers in the church. So there's no Jew, there's no Gentile. There's no male, there's no female, there's no bond, there's no free. And by implication, there's no young, there's no old. So in the body of Christ, whether you're a female or you're the male, or whether you're an adult or even you're a kid, kids can demonstrate spiritual gifts and contribute to the body also.
And disciple others.
Because there's no junior Holy Spirit.
Right.
They are saved, they are gifted, they are called, and they are supposed to be working. So
yes.
Absolutely.
And, so that's a shame. I'm sorry that happened.
I'm going to get a good book out of it. So.
Sure. But you know what? What's fascinating about that part of your story is that what I'm starting to see is that's unfortunately common.
It is.
It's unusual when a church says, I want a gifted person over our kids' ministry. They want a competent person. They want somebody who will, don't bother me with the details, just do your thing. they don't want a high tier team member who will help with everything and see the big picture and vision and put it all together. And that's weird. And it's interesting that you say that, because these are things I've already been thinking through, because I've been seeing it here and there and stuff.
There's usually less budget for training. It's a lower pay.
Right?
I feel like, though, training should be
Right?
prominent in kids
Right?
ministry, because that's where the kids are sponges, and that's where they're getting their foundation. If they get a foundation when they're kids, it is incredible how they grow and mature as they get older. It's like lightning fast.
And if 75% of people come to Christ before the age of 13, would you not think that would be our
That would be
emphasis?
where it should be.
Scripturally, the foundation. Like
We
all
should
of
be
this.
throwing our church budget there.
Yes.
I mean, we should be lobbing it right
We should
there.
not
And-
be having to fight. And the first place budget cuts happen? Children's ministry.
Man. Yeah.
But there are amazing places out there to get training, even free, because, depending on your church size, denomination, all those factors, you might not have any budget dollars.
Right.
There are free things, there are online things, there are books, there are resources. It's the beauty of the world we live in. Technology is
Absolutely.
available. So
Right. And even having podcasts are free.
Yeah.
Podcasts are free. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Spotify, and you can just absorb those things. And that's why we do this, because it's another avenue of free training for kids ministry, helping people develop philosophy and things like that.
Yeah.
So, and we have to, just came, by the way, the whole podcast will be like this. We'll just spontaneously talk about stuff, but within that realm, I see fewer and fewer people with a passion to be trained. It's almost like we can't get kids ministry volunteers, and the ones that do volunteer, not all of them, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying everybody, but they kind of begrudgingly, okay, oh, you want me to sit through a training? What are we talking about here? Instead of hungrily, I want to serve God, I want to be best equipped to serve God, because really discipleship is training. Mm-hmm. And you can't be a follower of Christ without being a disciple, a learner. And this part of it is training.
Yeah.
So
It's beautiful when we go to different churches and have the kids ministry workshops that we do, and see hungry workers, hungry volunteers that just want to pour the Bible into the kids. And
I love it.
disciple
So
them.
we're here at Manderley Camp. And one of the things that you guys do differently than a lot of the camps we go to is church sponsors come with the kids and stay with the kids, and they're their kids' counselors and all of that. So a lot of the camps, they have a summer staff of college students and whatnot, and not a lot of sponsors from the church. But I like it better because they go back home with those same sponsors. They might not ever see that college student again, but they go back home with those same sponsors. And I've seen what you're talking about, that same kind of passion here with some of these sponsors, that they love kids and they love kids. And that's really encouraging.
yeah, and they get to lead their kids to the Lord if God's working on their hearts this week. It's hands-on. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Really nice.
So I would challenge when you're talking about the volunteers that don't want training, because we want the easy button. But then if you're the leader in charge, how are you asking for volunteers?
Oh, that's one of our questions. So we'll just roll right into that. Talk to us in your experience. What have you found effective when it comes to recruiting volunteers?
So I'm going to tell you what's not effective first. Bulletins are not effective.
Right? Right?
Announcements are not effective.
Right?
Begging, we're going to have to cancel VBS if we don't get signups, or we're going to close this classroom if we don't get none of that works. Because who wants to sign up to be part of a sinking ship? You are casting to your congregation that this is an emergency. Your gifts, your talents, they're not important. We just need a warm body so that everybody's safe and alive and we're within ratio. We don't care what you can do. We don't care if you like kids. Just please come, help us, save us.
Right.
Do you want to sign up for that?
Sure.
No. But if we are talking about the discipleship opportunities, if we are saying, man, you get to serve, you get to spend a week loving on these boys and girls with the love of Jesus. If you're casting the vision for why you're doing what you do, not the please help me, you're going to get those high quality volunteers who want to take the training.
High quality volunteers, because they want to be a part of that. So when we did a systematic theology for kids on Wednesday nights, and it took 2 years to get through all the major doctrines of the faith. When we stood up and said, we're doing a systematic theology for kids on Wednesday night, and we are teaching them, not in these words, soteriology and pneumatology. We're teaching them ecclesiology and eschatology, not using those words.
But I hope you use those words.
To the adults, but to the kids, we would just say, something simpler. The doctrine of sin, the doctrine of... but when we showed the church family that, hey, we're going to do something real, some of them woke up and said, whoa, they're doing more than coloring pictures. Whoa. And like, I like what you said when you said quality volunteers, the ones that go, systematic theology, this sounds like fun. Yeah. And they want to jump in. Or I preached through the book of Ephesians in 1 year. Ed Encounters Ephesians was the sermon series. And when I cast it that way, like expository preaching for kids through the eyes of a kid, the quality volunteers came, and man, we had some quality volunteers. Yeah.
But the church world, it's that when children's ministry began, it was so the real church could happen.
Yes.
You need to keep them there, give them some cookies, a coloring sheet, read them a Bible story. I don't like the word story.
Right.
That way the real church can happen. And that's unfortunately still what most church people think.
Yeah.
That's that old school.
And that's what the disciples thought.
Yeah.
Get these kids away because we're doing important kingdom stuff. And Jesus was infuriated. Yes. How dare you try to keep the kids from me?
Let the children come to me.
Church leaders, you need to be casting the vision of what you're doing and why. So if you get announcement time, absolutely work in some children's ministry announcements. I would use VBS Sunday. Our pastor hated it. He would actually schedule vacation so he wouldn't have to be there. I'm like, I'll take the whole service because I want to show the salary payers of the church what we're doing, why we need children's ministry. So I'm casting the vision. Here's what they're learning. Here's what we're doing on Sunday. I ran our social media at church, so I would not just look at this picture. Aren't we so cute in our t-shirts? Here's what we learned this week. Here's this huge topic that you as an adult might not have been taught yet, but we are, by golly, doing it in a children's church. Always be casting the vision of what you're doing, even if you're not in recruiting season, because you're always in recruiting season.
Right?
Yeah, always.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, that's really good. So let's say this. Can you give us one valuable lesson you learned in your years in kids ministry? Like, I learned this.
Oh goodness! After 20 years, I learned a lot.
Well, what's the one thing that you think you would tell everybody that you learned?
So one of the most important things, obviously, like without saying, like, start with the Bible. I don't even need to expand on that, but that's number one. But the power of relationship in ministry is crucial. My first Sunday at my previous church, the parents told me about this 3rd grade boy, and he was already disconnected. Now, 3rd grade that's decision-making time on whether or not you're going to stay in church. He had no friends because he was a small church. He was in between age gaps. So no one his age, and friends are a big deal at that age group. And the lessons weren't, there was no depth. They were just holding through until someone got there. So I knew going in, okay, he's already at the not wanting to be a church phase. So that's priority number one. First Wednesday there, I used whatever supplies we had, and he was a sports kid. So we literally played basketball with a laundry basket and a beach ball. The next week, I got a picture of me and him drawing. A 3rd grader is drawing me pictures. I poured into him relationally to where he went from not wanting to be at church at all to where he sat beside me every Sunday singing hymns. He would hold my little guy's hand. He would be the only kid at events and be happy to be there every single Sunday because I cared about him and he knew it. I was loving on him with the love of Jesus. He kind of went away while he was in middle school, and then he came back, and who was the first person he told at church when he accepted Christ? He came back to me because I loved on him. The power of relationship is huge. They are feeling and experiencing Jesus's love through you. So every fiber of your being, even if this kid drives you bonkers and you cannot wait until they're out of your ministry, needs to be loving on them. Your face needs to show excitement when they're in the room. You need to be like, hey, where were you? I've missed you these last 2 weeks. All of you. I had another story is one of our church kids. He was saved. He was good. He went to another church's VBS. Summer brought, go to all the VBSs. He only went one day. I'm like, why didn't you go? Like, you love VBS. And he looks at me, 3rd, 4th grade, says, yeah, I could tell they didn't want me there. So him, no big deal. He saved, his family served, not a big deal. But what if that were a friend that brought a kid, their first exposure to Jesus,
Yeah.
and that kid felt unloved and unwanted and wanted nothing to do with it? Yeah. Will they come back? I mean, God knows, but we failed if that's us.
Right.
So relationally, you have to pour into your kids. If you want them to care about what you have to say about Jesus, you need to show them that you care because you're showing them Jesus' love. So start with the Bible, teach the Bible, but then love on these kids.
Yeah. That's
Yeah. Because kids are the church, and a core element of the church is sharing our lives, the fellowship. If kids feel like they belong to that, they know where their tribe is, and that's where they want to be.
Yeah.
And they have to be there, and nothing's going to stop them from being there. So making them feel loved and welcoming them and showing them, hey, this is where you belong, it makes all the difference in the world. And it made all the difference in my life when I was 15 years old, 16 years old.
You were emotionally hooked from the first time you walked into that church.
First time I walked in,
Montana.
the pastor shook my hand, looked at me, and I said, I'm glad you're here. I said,
Did you know how many kids haven't heard that?
this is my new church. He's glad I'm here.
Yes.
You know, and I grew up in a single mom home. And for a man to just shake my hand, look me in the eye and say, I'm glad you're here, I was like, don't know where you're going next week, Mom, but this is where I'm going. It's really strong. That's good.
Very big.
So how about this? You probably have experienced like speaking to other kids ministry workers, and obviously your own in your church, but then others as well. And there's a lot of good advice, you know, that you could share because of the experience that you have and the knowledge that God's given you and the gifting and all of that. But we don't have time to share all of that. But if you could share one thing and say, if I could just grab every kids ministry worker or pastor even, or your church, and just grab them by the shoulders and just say this one thing, what do you think that would be?
Okay, that's more than one thing, because if I'm telling pastors something, that's different than children's pastors. So we'll focus on children's pastors.
Okay.
You can have me back for pastors, and that's that's frying pan on the head worthy, because children's ministry matters. But to children's ministers, give them more. We have so long, and part of why we still have that stigma of just some cookies and coloring sheets is because we've not given them enough. We're entertaining them. Mm-hmm. We can entertain. McDonald's is entertaining. Chuck E. Cheese is entertaining. We don't need to entertain. We can make the gospel fun, but we need to be bringing it. We do not have time for weak sauce because eternity is at stake. So you need to be teaching doctrine and apologetics. You need to be giving our kids a biblical worldview. You need to be laying a strong foundation. If not, are you using your time well? If we have 1 hour at church, have you used that hour? Are you pointing them to Jesus? Are you teaching them his truths? Are you growing disciples? Or are you just entertaining? Because if you're just entertaining, you're not getting the job done. Eternity is at stake, so we have to give them more.
Yeah.
So let's keep the ball rolling. If you could grab every pastor and say this to every lead pastor, what would it be?
Your children's ministry is the most important ministry of your church. And you need to act accordingly. Budget needs to go that way. You need to be the biggest cheerleader for the children's ministry. You need to know what's happening. You need to know those families. You need to give your children's minister every opportunity for training and growth and resources. Quit making them the redheaded stepchild, because what they're doing, it's discipleship. Again, 75% of people are coming to Christ before the age 13. Your worldview is formed by that age. All of our resources need to go towards this. Mm-hmm. We don't need to just focus on senior adults or adult kids. Mm-hmm. Train your kids, because discipleship is happening. It's more than just babysitting. And we need the church to view it that way.
Yeah.
So one thing, being here at camp this week, that I actually encouraged a pastor and his wife, head pastor and his wife, who are here with their kids. I'm like, this is great. Mm-hmm. It reminds me watching them of when I was a kid, and every time in a teen, every time we'd go to camp, almost every time, the head pastor, not just the youth pastor, the kids workers, the head pastor would be there at least 90% of the time, pouring into us, joking around with us, just forming relationships. And we're hooked. I mean, that's what you were saying. You're hooked. And so I know it's not possible for every lead pastor to go to every Bible camp or every activity or whatever.
But show some skin in the game.
But show up, not just with budget. show up in person and form those relationships with the kids as well, because it's not, I mean, it goes a long way.
So at your church, the churches you've been involved in the past, what age group in the church did you get the most visitors in?
Oh, it's always kids.
It's
Always
kids. So,
Maybe us.
so shouldn't the pastors be there to welcome the families, to welcome the parents, to welcome the kids, to...
You mean the senior pastor shouldn't take vacation during VBS week?
Exactly.
10 years at that church.
But don't...
He did not appear one time. He would pop in and go down to snacks if he was in the building. And I'm like,
What a
are you
wasted
doing, man?
opportunity. He's not going to meet that many unchurched people in a year
Yeah.
than in that one day.
Yeah.
So be there. I'm hear me, I'm inserting myself, but be there and you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's finish with one more question. If you could tell parents one thing, and every parent out there, what would you say to those? Well, we'll say believing parents. Obviously, unsaved parents, the one thing you tell them is,
hey, want to meet Jesus?
yes. but believing parents, what would you tell them?
It's your job to lead. Scripturally, you are commanded. God did not tell church leader Miss Amber or Mr. Forrest to lead. He told you to lead. You are commanded over and over. You are to impress God's truths upon these children. You are to pass on your faith. You are to teach them diligently, train them up. All of these scriptures backing it up that it's your job. And it can feel overwhelming if you don't know what to do. If you are a new believer, a younger believer, if you don't feel like you have the gift of teaching. We in the church world, we take that for granted. If we're kid people, we know how to talk kids. Not everybody does, even if you're a parent. Just start with something.
Yeah.
Read a Bible verse. As much as I don't love story things, get a Bible storybook. If you've got little ones and read through it, it can have pictures. Yeah. There's so many resources in 2024. We've got a million things to teach your kids. So do something.
Yeah. Start
something
somewhere.
Is better than nothing.
Yeah.
Do not let fear or worries, you're not going to mess it up. Teach them God's truth. Make it a part of your life, and then it becomes part of their life. So it's your job. So do it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving us some of your time. And we will be back next month with another episode, and we'll see you guys then.